Hey everyone, Pastor Nathan here. We're in Matthew's Gospel today. Just spent a little time in a devotion there on Matthew 8, 18 through 22. This is a short little section, but in my own reading as I'm coming across this, there's two things that struck out at me from this section. First is this. There's three things. First is when Jesus, when the crowd gathered around him, Jesus gave orders to go over to the other side. It was like, this is early on in Jesus's ministry. It's like, okay, it's time to leave, time to depart. There's this crowd's getting maybe a little bit big, seems to be the connection there. So he's on his way over to the other side now. But before he goes, there's two guys who come up to him. Well, one who comes up to him and another one who kind of follows that up. But they're from two different spaces. One is a scribe, at least in the ESV. It's the scribe came up to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And what's interesting about this is that these scribes were, it's not probably meaning scribe in the literal sense that this was like a copyist. The Greek word there is can also mean like a person who was an expert in the law. So this would have been someone who was kind of at the center of society at the time, the center of social and religious life in that community, in that context. And so they had a certain amount of kind of respect, authority, a certain kind of like way of living that was, that was not used to being at the margins, that was not used to being maybe even uncomfortable. And Jesus says to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Jesus' direct response to this guy is, "Hey, I'm not living in the center of society. I'm not at the right parties being seen with the right people in order to make my way in the world. I'm working at the edges. I'm working at the margins. And I am marginalized by the rest of the religious sort of, if you will, elites of the time." Jesus very much kind of identified with and was himself on the outside. When it came to the circles that this scribe, this teacher of the law, this expert in the law would have often perhaps been connected to. So that's the first response. Is like Jesus is like, "Look, I work at the edges, I work at the margins. I'm not working at the space that you're used to." And assumingly this guy then doesn't actually continue to follow him, then he actually backs away. He hadn't thought about that following Jesus would mean giving up some of the things that he enjoyed and loved about being in his place in the world. The second guy that comes is another of the disciples. So this guy's already followed Jesus to an extent. At least Matthew describes him as a disciple. So he comes to him and says, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." There's a lot of context with this, but essentially, or maybe the Cliff Notes version of what is being asked here is like, "Jesus, let me get my inheritance and then I'll come follow you." Jesus, looking at this guy who already sort of purported to follow Jesus, says, "Follow me." He says, "Look, you follow me. You akalutheo me." This is the Greek word. You come after me. You're the one who, don't go after money or wait till you can, things are comfortable or good. You give up the things of this world, and you give up the things the world chases after, including reputation with family and reputation with and the resources that you may have gotten from your family because you didn't want to kind of abandon their sort of status in the world in order to come follow me. You've made your choice essentially by choosing to stay and so forth. And so I think just interesting, these two things and for our life today is the first is the scribe comes up to him and is unwilling to perhaps give up his way of life in order to work in the spaces Jesus would work in order to be identified with Jesus. And then the second guy is wants both. He wants to be able to maintain his relationships and status, but also follow Jesus, and he wants the resources of both. And Jesus will make clear later on, you can't worship both God and money. You can't serve both God and money. So Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. So I guess my question for you is this: where are those spaces right now where maybe you're being tested, tempted, challenged, either with the circles in which you run or the things that you want to go after in this life? Where are those spaces, like perhaps asking you to prioritize them over following Jesus, over doing what Jesus says to do, over doing Jesus's commands, and loving him and following him first and foremost? I mean, he has given everything for us, including his very life. What are some things that are trying to horn in on that, if it were, to try to butt their way into that relationship and say they are more important and more valuable than Jesus and what Jesus asks us to do? Anyhow, hope that's helpful for you today. We'll talk again soon. Take care.